All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday School. I'm not going to teach. Norman Denler is here from Kids International. He's going to be sharing his ministry with us. I just wanted to come up and introduce him real quick. So, Norman, take it away.
All right. Cool, guys. Thanks for having me here. It was a lot of fun last night for everybody who was there. I'm just going to share a little bit. I was trying to figure out this morning. I'm like, I don't want to repeat, except I'm going to. Right? You'll hear some of the same stories again. When I was here last, it was 2018, and I remember sharing here. It was a really, really difficult time in my life, right? And some stuff going on, and I went back to the Philippines, and then, COVID happened, and everything shut down. And I had to make a decision. I was like, there was one time I was like trying to figure out, am I going back home or am I staying here, right? And I knew the ministry really needed somebody there, but at the same time, one of my daughters was having a baby, and I wanted to be there. And so I struggled and struggled with it, and then I finally made a decision. I said, okay, God, I'm going to go. And so I bought a ticket, and probably a week before I was going to leave. And I remember the night before I was going to leave, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I would tell you, if I ever heard God speak, I heard him speak that night. And he said, stay. I said, don't go. And I called my daughters, and I said, I just can't. I don't feel comfortable. I can't go. And canceled my ticket, and and I'll kind of describe, that's what I'm going to do today, as I'm going to talk about 2020 and what God did and some of the stories from there. But I remember during all of this that I got to a certain point, and there's a pastor friend of mine in Australia, and I was talking to him, and I said, Jeff, I don't understand it. I can't explain it, but I feel at peace. And he made the comment to me, he said, Norman, that's called a peace that passes understanding. And it brought back my, navigator days and verse memory, and it's like, have no anxiety about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God will keep your hearts moved. And all of a sudden I realized that verse, I'd always read that verse before saying, if you have a need, pray to God and God's going to answer that need. And it doesn't say that. It says you have a need and God's going to give you peace in the midst of it. And it's a peace that you can't understand. And because of COVID, because of everything God did at the ministry during COVID, God really did give me a peace that I was in the right place. That as much challenge as there was, I was at peace. And so I'm just going to share a little bit. Some of this is going to be a repeat. But when COVID happened, we were set to have like an incredible year. And I was so excited for 2020. We had all these people scheduled to come and all this stuff happening at the ministry. And all of a sudden, every team started to cancel and things started to change and things started to lock down. And we got to the point where the Philippines shut everything down. People couldn't come in, people couldn't leave, all of that kind of stuff. And we were like, what are we going to do? I mean, we can't, okay, school is not in session, the kids are at the children's home, whatever. And we had a feeding program that we were like, I sent a text to the mayor and I said, can we continue our feeding program? He's like, no, you're gathering people, right? And so it was like, okay, great. And so we're all there like everybody else going, oh, what are we going to do? And then our families from the school started saying they were hungry. And so we went to the market in front. So this is a picture. We had a few people who were left at the ministry center who got stuck in the Philippines. And we would go cook food, and we would open the gates. This is literally right in front of our ministry center. And we would just hand out food. And the first day we cooked these huge pots, 5 of them. They're gone in 5 minutes. And we put 10 pots, gone in 10 minutes. 18 pots. We were doing it every day. And God just took and really used that feeding program it went unbelievably big. Like, we were feeding before COVID 3,000 meals a week. During COVID 2020, 2021, 250,000 meals a week. It was insane, absolutely insane. And This is an example of it, okay, to give you a picture. In the food that we cooked, Filipinos like ginger, right? And so as we were ramping up, we would go buy ginger at the market, and it was like we would buy every day. We'd have to go to the market. So finally I said, you know what? Let's just order like 400 kilos of ginger. That's like 800 pounds of ginger. That was enough for 2 weeks. So I had it stacked on these boxes, okay? And all of a sudden, our staff come to us and says, sir, the ginger is spoiling. And I'm like, ginger doesn't spoil. Sir, it's in plastic bags inside of the box. I'm like, oh, great. So we have all this ginger, so we spread it out on the table. I mean, it's literally this deep in ginger, and we had to go peel it and crush it up and all of this kind of stuff in one day. And so we got all of these people at the ministry center, and every bit of that ginger, we would peel it. I don't know if you know this, but when you peel ginger, if you use your hands start to burn. I mean, it is just like, we had like 40 youth inside of there that were just peeling the ginger and getting it all ready. And it was a time that we saw God move in incredible ways. These are a couple of pictures from the feeding program. I'd always say about this little girl here, you can tell people are smiling just by their eyes. Their eyes. I can see the big smile as we came and fed. And she was, this little boy here was playing with this kite, and this old man. It was one of the times where when we went on, normally when we go on feedings, it's all of the young people are come out. And in this case, it wasn't. It was old people, families, everything. They would come and they'd have a pot, and we would just say, how much? They'd say 3 families. We would fill up the pot. And it was during those times that I saw God move in so many ways. I saw so many people's lives change because of this. We partnered with a bunch of pastors and went to their communities, and they would come with us and help us feed, and they would bring people from their church, and it really connected them with the community. We did a conference for the pastors in 2020. 2021, we said, anybody who is part of the feeding ministry, any of the pastors come. 500 pastors came. And we did a little survey and said, what happened because of COVID in your churches? And I remember the survey, and one of the numbers that sticks out to me is 60 churches planted in the middle of 2020. Some of those churches had 200 people already in the middle of very, very poor communities. And so God just did some incredible things. But one of the most incredible was when we were cooking all of this food. If you can imagine cooking 250,000 meals, it took a lot of work. And so I ended up asking the local government if we could have some youth from our community come and live in our ministry center. And they said yes, and I invited 60 youth in, or 40 youth in. And at the same time, I invited a youth pastor. And during that time, we would cook food. It was like all day, 8 p.m. at night until 4 p.m. the next day. We had a bunch of different shifts going and cooking and cleaning and doing all of this stuff. And then we would do sessions at night. And I don't know what it is, but when you combine a stressful time with a spiritual emphasis, God starts to move. And that's what happened with these youth. And here, this is a picture that I think it's probably our third set. We would swap out kids. They would get tired, so we'd send a set home, and we'd have another set come. And the first set, we had kids come to Christ, and just in incredible ways. And the second set, you would have these kids who just accepted Christ a couple of weeks before, 3 weeks before, praying with somebody who just accepted Christ in the meeting. And every camp we would do, there would be more and more kids that would come to Christ. And the worship times that we would have would last forever. Like we'd start at 6 o'clock, we wouldn't end until 11:30 at night. And it was just God moving in. I've never seen God work in that way in my life before. And it was just such a blessing to see this. So this picture, we after one of the camps, AJ, who's kind of our youth pastor, he comes up to me and he says, Norman, he says, all these kids just came to Christ, and he's like, I feel like God's saying baptize them. And I said, there's nothing more biblical than saying I accepted Christ. There's water. And so he gets up and he explains baptism. He says, anybody who wants to get baptized? And so the first camp, we had like 6 baptized. The second camp, we had like 10. The third camp, we had 16. We had 24. We had 32. This is actually I think it's 24. Okay, and we did this thing where, as they would, the night we had this cross up front, and we had these pieces of paper, and we had this thing of kind of writing your sins or your things that you wanted to confess on the cross. And if you had ever accepted Christ before, use white paper, and if you've never accepted Christ, use red paper. And this is the cross. That camp. And it was just incredible to see these young people who we had been trying to reach for years and years in the streets. They would be at the gate wanting to come in, you guys have seen them, wanting to swim. Teams would say, come on and swim, and so they'd swim, and afterwards they'd share Christ, and the next week, no change. They'd still be at the gate waiting for another team to come and invite them to swimming. We had a young lady here from the U.S., and she was building relationships with a bunch of the people in the community, a bunch of the boys that play basketball outside of our gates. And she said, is it okay if I invite them? And I'm like, absolutely. She invites them. The first day, there were 6 of them. They sat in the back as we were doing the worship. They sat there in the back, kind of just everybody else is, standing and jumping and worshiping, and in the back, they're just kind of sitting there like, what in the world have we gotten ourselves into? The next day, one of them comes to me and says, I'm going home. So he goes home, and he missed out because 5 of his friends accepted Christ during that and are still leaders in our ministry. And so this picture is kind of famous for me because AJ made the mistake of posting it on his Facebook. So the day after he posted it, the police came to our gate. And they said, this is not allowed. This is not allowed. I said, well, we have permission from the local government. They're like, do you have written permission? I'm like, no, but we, and he's like, you need written permission, all this stuff. So we actually talked to the mayor, got the written permission, went to the police station, gave it to them, and they said, okay. And I tell you what, it was just an incredible, incredible time. And God's provision during that time. Like if you can imagine, like middle of COVID, and we are doing this huge, huge feeding. Number one is we had no money. Right? We actually had to cut staff. And people will say, how in the world did you feed 250,000 meals? And I'm like, I have no idea. I mean, God just kept doing things over and over and over. Like, we used to get shipments. These are called manna packs. They come from the U.S., and they get shipped to the Philippines, and we use them for the food. So we had a container worth of food, but that went very, very quickly. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, no more containers are coming. And so what are we going to do? And we're running out of food, and all of a sudden, somebody hears about what we're doing, and they deliver us 100 sacks of rice every week, the local Filipinos. And then there was one time I was sitting at the table with the pastor Art, who kind of ran our feeding program. And I was like, okay, Pastor, we got to slow down. We're going to run out of money. We need to cut way back on the feedings. Like one quarter, he's like, Norman, people are hungry. The pastors still need food. We need this. And I'm like, we don't have money. So you either continue feeding and we run out of food in 3 days, or you slow down and we might have, or a week, or we slow down and we might have a month's worth of food. I get up from the table, I pull out my phone, and I have this email from my former boss, who's not a Christian, by the way. And he says, listen, we've met, we want to send $50,000 to support the efforts in the Philippines. I walked back over Pastor Art, I said, Art, never mind. And over that happened. Remember when I said the ginger? Okay? So we chop up all this ginger, and there's only one problem. Now it's going to spoil even faster. And I had this strategy, okay? I always have plans. So I'm like, okay, we got lots of missionaries, and we can ask them, they have freezer space. Can we store some of this in the ginger you saw on the table? It's going to take a lot of freezer space. Like after we chopped it up, we had these big containers. They were this big by this tall. 3 of them filled. It's like, what are we going to do? And so I'm calling around saying, can we get freezer space? It's like, I have a little bit of freezer space. And I started thinking about the logistics of trying to drive to all of these houses to give them ginger and then go pick it up and all that kind of stuff, okay? Then we get another text. It says, tomorrow we have freezers being delivered. They'd heard about the feeding. They had come and visited, and I had mentioned we needed freezers. This was a couple of weeks before. And the day we needed them, they said, "Hey, we're gonna ship some freezers." And I'm not just talking about freezers. We got a small freezer, like the one on the right, and this huge double freezer on the left that we still have at the ministry today. And God just kept doing things over and over and over again, and it was just phenomenal to be part of and see him move in that way. Like I said, I've never seen him move like that before. This is the example of working with the pastors. So these are a bunch of different areas we would feed. And they were like, the church was into it. So over here, they would all dress in the same, and they would come out and we would deliver these, the containers I was talking about this big? When we first started the feeding program, I think when you guys were there, we had these little plastic bins. Well, those broke very quickly. And we would go around to try to find more of them, and there aren't any. Okay, and so I kept buying bigger ones and bigger ones, and bigger ones just mean they're heavier and they break faster, right? And so then we found these, they're water containers. They're like big garbage cans, and they're like this big around, this tall, 100-liter. And we would fill them 3/4 full of food, and some days we would do 200 of those containers. We ripped out the seats in the back of our vehicles. We would load up, in our vans. We would load up all of these things and drive places and bring them and drop them off. And one of those containers would be gone within 15, 20 minutes. We would go community by community. We did this feeding, and we'd drive it all the way down to Tondo. You guys have been down there, poorest area of Manila. We would bring 20 of those, and 20 of them. We would work with 4 pastors who were legends, because we would go down there and we would distribute that food we would get there at like 8 in the morning, and we would have it all distributed by noon and drive back and get more food and go out to another place. So the pastors were like so thankful for this, and it so connected them with their communities in ways that would have never happened otherwise. We also had, in the middle of COVID, there was a typhoon that hit Manila. Actually, 2 of them. Lots of flooding, and so here you have all these people that are in the middle of COVID, and all of a sudden their houses are destroyed. They have to pull all of their stuff out, and it actually, for us, ended up becoming an opportunity, because we had all of these pastors and all of this food and supplies and all of that type of stuff. So we would go into those communities and bring that food. And you talk about a time when people are in need and you come and meet that need, they're receptive to the gospel. They really are. And over and over and over again, I heard the stories of that. So my heart is youth ministry. I've always been that way, but God reawakened it in the middle of COVID. So as God started doing this with the youth coming to Christ and all that type of stuff, we started this thing called Praise Party. And it started because of, remember those times that we would worship God until 11:30 at night? One of those times, the people in the community behind us saw and heard and reported us, and again, the police showed up at the gates, and they said, "We understand you're having a party." We're like, "Nah, it's not a party. We're just, we have permission, blah, blah." And it invented this term called Praise Party. And so every Friday night, we would do Praise Party. And we started at the YMC, at our ministry center, and this room back here is what we call ISO Hall, and it fits probably around 60 people. And so we'd start, and we did like one time, and we'd have 60 people in there, and then it started getting bigger, and so we'd do two times. We'd do it at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then 6 o'clock, and then it got bigger and bigger, and then we had to pull every chair for both of them out. We had 200 youth towards the end of 2020. I don't know how we did it, because the Philippines was so locked down, okay? But because of this whole feeding thing, we were allowed, if you wear masks, I'm curious. He's not wearing a mask. Anyways, but it just over and over and over, it was amazing what God did. At the beginning of 2020, we had no youth ministry. None. At the beginning of 2021, we had 300 high school students attending Praise Party. We had 200 middle school students. And today, Youth Lab is still very, very much of an active thing. And I was always concerned, because these kids, Youth Lab, the thing that is really cool about Youth Lab is that 80% of the kids that came to Youth Lab did not go to church. Why is that cool? Because we were reaching the ones who needed to be reached, right? But I was always concerned because they didn't want to go to church. There's not a lot of good youth groups in our area. They go to church and it's like, this is boring. This isn't what I heard in. And back 2.5 years ago, a pastor from the U.S. came and wanted to plant a church, and we started talking about it, and I'm like, why don't you use the basement of our high school to plant it? And I never imagined that when he started the meeting to talk about having people help, that a bunch of the leader youth from Youth Lab would come and want to help. And so that church is now probably 95% under 25. It is amazing. And I love going there, and I see these kids that accepted Christ in the middle of COVID and now are up on stage preaching on Sunday. Not just there, they are preaching on Sunday. And it just, incredible time. We did little kids. What would happen is our youth that accepted Christ wanted to reach out to the communities. And so the communities that they lived in. And so they would get a bunch of them and they'd go out and do this thing called YL Kids. So they'd go out into the communities and gather kids. We started going with vehicles and bringing them back to the Ministry Center on Saturdays, and we'd have 200 kids. And the leaders were our youth, okay, that would do that. And then they started going out into the community and bringing them in and doing all kinds of fun stuff. We started Youth Lab Juniors during that time. And then Church Connect. So these are pictures of the pastors that were part of Church Connect. And it was just that unexpected thing that has continued to this day where we're still connected literally with hundreds of pastors. About 3 weeks ago, we did a pastors conference. We usually do 3 or 4 a year. They had 300 pastors come. And they had brought in speakers and all of that kind of stuff. And so God really produced that. Here's a picture of the clinic because of COVID, okay? And I counted, I think there's 26 babies there. This was the well baby check. So they're all less than a month old. And they just took them in a room and piled them all in there and took pictures of it, right? Incredible ministry, incredible way of connecting with the community and with people that are there. Then we said, you know what? We have this wonderful thing, the clinic, and all these babies are born, and Philippines' first birthday party is a big deal. And so we're like, what if we had a first birthday party? And we put on a party for all of these that first birthday, and it actually helped, this new ministry called Family Ministry, it dramatically expanded family ministry because they would go there, they would meet the parents, we'd spend the time getting to know the parents and all that. They even would talk to the parents, they'd find out, okay, they've been together for 20 years, they're not married, would you like to be married? Yes. So they did a marriage class, they did training, and then we would do mass weddings with six of those parents, and the little kids are there, and I can't even describe it. These are, by the way, this is after COVID, this 2021. Those big bins were very hard to carry. So we figured out a better way. It's they're 5-gallon bucket type things. And so we bought 500 of them. So these are them lined up because we needed to paint on them kids because they kept disappearing. We could bring them, everybody would take our containers, and we're like, why are the pastors that we're doing this with stealing our containers? So this is Youth Lab. So this is when we had 300 youth in our auditorium at night, and lights and worship and all of that kind of stuff going on. So let's repeat 2020. Anybody with me? It's amazing. And God, during that time, I already shared you kind of one of the things that God taught me because of it, of the whole thing of answered prayer. And sometimes that just means peace. But God taught me so many lessons through 2020. I'd like to share a few of them. So, first of all, do the hard thing. I think we have to, as Christians, choose to depend on God. It's not this thing where, as things happen, I'm going to depend on God or I'm going to trust God in that. We, as Christians, need to put ourselves in situations that we have to depend on God. Because we can live super comfortable lives. And when we live super comfortable lives, nothing happens. When we put ourselves in uncomfortable situations where we're like stretched, all of a sudden God shows up. And you start seeing things happen. And I over and over, I kind of already shared you the thing of the money coming in, of the person sending in that money. I would have never seen God work that way had we not been over the edge, right? I just think that's how God works. It's like when we get to the point where we're like, God, I don't know what to do and I don't know how this is going to happen. All of a sudden, God comes through. And it's just incredible. So choosing to depend on God, Exodus 14:15, the Lord will fight for you. All you need to do is be still. And here's the Israelites right before the Dead Sea, right? Or the Red Sea, and here's this whole army coming after them. And you could see all of them going, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Let's fight, let's run, let's do something. And God's response was, all you need to do is be still, and I will fight the battle for you. And I think that, to me, is a lesson that we all need to learn. Like, God is going, if we put ourselves in those situations, God's going to come through. Because He always does, right? Take risks. So before COVID, I think actually when I came here, I might have talked about it a little bit. God taught me 2 words in 2019. Fear not. Fear not, fear not, fear not, fear not. You know how many times in the Bible it says fear not? Over and over and over again it says fear not. You know, to Joshua at Jericho, to, Paul, as in his ministry, over 500 times, right? Fear not, fear not, fear not. And I think that when he says fear not, what he's really saying is, take risks. Don't be afraid. Because we don't do things because of fear. I don't do things because of fear. One of the things is, before 2020, speaking in front of people, I could kind of do it, but I was deathly afraid of it. And when God did this in me, because people would ask at the ministry, hey, can you share? Could you share at church? Could you, blah, blah, blah. No. I would constantly come up with an excuse. I'm busy, I'm whatever. And in 2020, I made a decision and a commitment. I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to take the opportunities, and I'm not going to let fear rule my life. I almost said ruin my life, which I also think is true. Relationship above all else, right? Love God, love others, right? It wasn't about the food. It's not about delivering babies. It's not about Bible study. It's not about all of these different things. It's about relationship. Like, one of my favorite verses in Thessalonians is, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, not only the gospel of God, gospel of God's good, but not only the gospel of God, our lives as well. We did life with you. We had relationship with you, right? Value relationship above everything is one of the other values. And then, welcome the new. Welcome the new. God's constantly doing new things. And I think sometimes I can get so comfortable with where I'm at that when He does new things, it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I kind of want to go back to what it was, where I was comfortable. And I think we always have that tendency. And nope. So there's the verse that kind of goes along with this is old wine, new wineskins, right? Is we get, what ends up happening to us, and this is in Christian context, I think, is we end up getting used to the way things are. God is, if you think about it this way, God is pouring down new wine all the time, right? And sometimes we need to do something to hold that wine. We need to build a sanctuary, we need to put in carpet, we need to paint the walls, we need to make it comfortable, we need to do these things. That is called a wineskin. right? The way we do worship, the way we do our Bible studies, the way we do all this type of stuff. What ends up happening over time, all the time, is that we get attached to the wineskin. We get attached to the wineskin. We say, I love this wineskin, right? I did when I was younger, I was a program director at a camp. And it was a new camp in Colorado, and it was for high school students. And so we were like, what are we going to do? And we planned it, and we had our staff get together, and here's all of the things we're going to do. We're plan, and we're going to do this. And we had the camp, and it went awesome. Like, kids came to Christ. It was incredible. It was amazing. So we took the next few days off, and then we got together, and we said, okay, we have another camp in 2 weeks. What are we going to do? We all agreed. We said, let's do the same thing. Let's do the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, let's do the same thing. The words that I think God told me after that the next day were, Norman, as soon as your form becomes your reason for success, your success will end. As soon as we think it's us, as soon as we think it's my form, my method, my thing, all of a sudden the wine stops and the wineskin busts. The wine goes all over the place. It's a big mess, and you don't have the life of God anymore, right? And so, to me, I need to constantly be welcoming the new things that God is doing and not get attached to what I was. So, go where God goes. I always have the tendency of trying to create situations where I think about a ministry and I say, okay, this is the ministry what I'm going to do, and we're going to do this, and it's my idea. And I go places to try to get God to follow me. Yeah, I'm going to do this and see if God follows me. I'm going to do this. In COVID, it was just following where God was doing stuff. It was like you'd see something going on, you'd say, let's come around that, right? Let's come around that. And I know there's times where we need to be like, okay, let's go do this, okay? But sometimes we need to be observant to what God is doing in our midst, listen to that, see it, react to it, and get alongside of that, rather than just, it's my ideas and my stuff. So I would just say that, and I said this last night, God uses hard times, difficulties, persecutions in our life to accomplish His will. And He did that in 2020 in incredible, incredible ways. But God has challenged me with something, which is when Paul said, he begged and pleaded for God to take away the thorn in the flesh, and God said, my grace is sufficient for you. And I always thought about grace in a particular way. What is God's grace? Well, I learned something when I read that verse. It says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. You know what I think the grace is? The grace is the weaknesses in our life. Because those weaknesses drive us to Him. Okay? In John, it talks about it's grace upon grace is one translation, but another translation, which I think is more accurate, a grace that replaces the grace that's already given. And it goes on and it says, for the law came for this, and Jesus came for this. The law was grace. The law drove us to Christ. Our difficulties are grace. They drive us to Christ. If we look at them correctly, it really makes a difference in those difficulties in our lives. So that's kind of my lessons from 2020. And I don't know what our time is. It's 10:23. What time do you normally? Okay. So does anybody have any questions? And I can tell more stories. I've got more stories. But anybody have any questions about what happened or the ministry itself? I'll share a little bit in service. So I was trying to keep the two separate. But it's actually hard to totally, because what we've done, what we changed is we still do our feedings. So we go out and feed, but we also, now we don't cook all of the food for the pastors. It's kind of a cool thing that's happened because of COVID. They come in every Thursday and Saturday, and they just sit around and do life together. And after it, they will pick up the boxes of food. And then they will go cook that food and distribute it. Our feedings, we are probably still at maybe 6,000 to 7,000. But when I look at the pastors, I think they're at least 4 times that amount, right? So it's come down a lot, because COVID, it was just like everybody's hungry, everybody's, whatever. So it's not like we're doing the same thing. We do 3 containers a year, so 1,200 boxes of food on each container, and we do about 3 per year. Where we used to do like 1 every year, or maybe a little less than 1 every year. So it's probably at this point 3 times what it was. Yeah, so the way that works is Orphan Grain Train pays for all of the food. Like what happens is they have a church do the packing of it, and the church helps support getting it packed, and then they have donors that pay for the shipping of it. But there's cost in receiving a container. So a container ends up costing us around $2,000 to receive, if we're lucky, because it depends on how long it takes us to get it out of port to be able to do that. So, yeah, the feedings are still an amazing way that God uses to really change the community and change people. I believe that. So 2019 was set for, 2019 we had around 1,100 people come in the year, 1,200 people come in the year. 2020 was set to blow that out. This year was our first year of really having teams again, and I think we hit like 1,100, 1,200. So, and that's the teams are, again, to emphasize, I don't view teams as my viewpoint on teams is when teams come to serve, I know they come to serve, and I think there's value in that, and it does help us. But my view on teams is it changes them. It is a ministry, right? It's one of the ministries of Kids International Ministries. I see so many people come that God changes them for the rest of their lives. We have one person who came. It's a young girl from California. She came for 2 months last year, and she loved the ministry, and she loved the children's home and Adonai and all this type of stuff. And so she sent an email after she got back. She says, I'd like to come back for a year. Can I do like an internship? Because I talked about that. And I said, yes. And so she came back. She was there for 8 months, and she came to me and she says, I want to stay. I want to be a missionary. And so she made the decision, this is what I want to do. We had another guy that came to the ministry way back. We have many stories like this. It's the hidden ministry of Kids International Ministries. He comes and he meets his future wife in our ministry center, and now he's a missionary in the Philippines and helps run another organization. We have one of, in our community, there's a family that the ministry has reached out to over and over and over the years, and just a lot of, it's a great family, like 10 kids. Well, one of them we could never really get. His name was Armin. And Armin was a drug addict, on alcohol, you list anything, right? He would say, when he shares his testimony, it's pretty raw. Like he's like, I used to sell my body to men to make money so I could get money to go to school, right? But just a rough life. And he came into the ministry. One of the teams that was at the ministry center invited him to translate for him because he speaks English very well. And so Armin comes in and he translates for the team, sharing the gospel and whatever, and he ends up accepting Christ. And on that team, or at the ministry center at the same time, was this Sophie, who is Australian, and got to know him a little bit. They continued, Facebook, whatever, and at the beginning of COVID, before COVID, she decided she was going to come to the Philippines for 6 months to go to YWAM, and Armin was going to go to YWAM as well, and they were thinking about, well, let's at least be around each other and see if this is something that's going to last. And then COVID happened. And YWAM kind of shut down, and then they ended up moving to our ministry center on the day we had that ginger. Sophie is so funny because she you know how somebody she rolls her eyes like nobody else. I mean, you say something, and she talks about that ginger like she came there, and the first day it was like, what in the world have I done? Because they were in YWAM, shut down, lockdown, all this kind of stuff. Anyways, so during that time, they ended up deciding they wanted to get married. They ended up getting engaged. They wanted to go back to Australia to get married. Australia was shut down, locked down big time, so they got married at our ministry center. They both became missionaries with us. For 5 years, they were missionaries with us. Awesome in youth lab. I tell you what, God used them in so many ways. And Armin is one of the best preachers I know. When I talked about preaching at Rockfish, he regularly would get up there. And he has this connection with these kids that is just phenomenal. And so God, I really call it the hidden ministry. There's many, like I could probably list off 8 or 10 stories of people who find their future spouse in the Philippines. It's amazing. So, yeah. Other questions? Let me do something here. I'll show you some stuff. It's just some pictures, and they'll get me thinking. So this is Youth Lab when they meet downstairs. And one of the cool things that happened with Youth Lab last year we decided, we had talked about doing like an evangelistic conference for a long time. And so last year we did a evangelistic conference, and we invited, it's all through these churches. So God really coordinated all of this. We asked the pastors to invite their leader youth, who would then invite people from their community, and they would come, and then they would follow up with them. So we did this conference, and we ended up having 1,400 youth come to this conference. It was incredible. This year, next month, we are renting what's called Yarnez Center, and 4,500. So you guys could pray for that, okay? Where it's, and I believe it's going to happen. I really think that it's going to get pretty packed out because we have so many people that our dream. We talked about this in the middle of 2020. I remember our dream is do you guys? The older ones will know. You know the fight with Ali and Frazier. It was in the Philippines, and it's in Manila, Thrilla in Manila. There's the stadium that it's at. You can rent that stadium, and it's like 40,000. So we were like praying and being like, God, let's do 40,000. You know, but God's doing some incredible things with it. So this is Tondo. In Tondo, a lot of people make their money collecting garbage. So literally, you'll see them separating out plastic and metal, and they take the wire and they'll burn off they'll put it in a fire, and you smell plastic burning. It's because they're burning off the plastic so they can recycle the metal. Kids in the Philippines, you guys who have been there, they are the friendliest that you ever. It's amazing when teams come. When young people come. And I talk to them after they go to Tondo. One of the things they will say, which to me is exactly what we want. I go, so what did you think of Tondo? And they go, those kids have absolutely nothing. And they're happy. And they don't understand it. They're like, how can you be happy and have nothing? Isn't that a great lesson? For a kid. My daughter, one of my daughters, is in the Philippines right now. That's Rebecca. She does our social media. And then it's the other person there is from a team that just came this year with the church. But when you go on feedings, this is kind of what it's like. Is they all come running, and they all want to eat, and they all want to play, and they'll, if you have a basketball, they'll start playing basketball. They'll do all of that kind of stuff. He's on jet lag. I told them, I just visited with them. The reason I have these pictures is because I pulled the pictures from their trip. It's the first day, so when you first arrive in the Philippines, especially it's in the morning, I'm like, okay, go, 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 go. You got to stay awake, right? Stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. And so we bring them on to feedings, and we do this and we do that, try to keep people awake. But he is definitely feeling the jet lag. But this is just what it's like all the time when teams are there. People remember the feedings and all of that. This is our basketball court. God was amazing at how he did things for the ministry. So about 3 years ago, a guy came to us and said, what are we doing for the boys in the Philippines? And I related with what he said because there's a bunch of girls' homes, but it's very hard if you have a problem with a boy. And I said, we'd love to build a boys' home. And he's like, okay, I'll donate the money for it, all of it. And so I sent him plans for a boys' home and a small basketball court. And I said, any good boys' home needs a basketball court. And it's like, his only comment back was, make it better. And so we made it a lot better. Like, this basketball court is amazing. So this is an organization from the U.S. called Hoop Bus. And they have a branch in the Philippines, and they put it on a jeepney. So you'll notice there's a basketball thing on the jeepney that they kind of put up, and it's just this attraction. And it was pouring down. They normally do it in the street. It was pouring down rain that day, so I said, just use the basketball court. And so they came in, and this is like everybody on the basketball court. That great ministry, and basketball is a great way to share Christ with people. It just is. I mean, you guys know that because you actually go and do that. A lot of times communities flood. A lot of times when teams are there, like this community, we came there. This is probably 2 days after the flood. It was up to more over the second story, right? And they just, they live there, and after it goes down, they go back and they live there again. And it's kind of weird for us, anyways. I'll just see what other pictures I have here. This is the form of transportation, the tricycle. By the way, so sad. Did you guys know Pastor Mork? Did you ever meet Pastor Mork over here when you guys were there? I don't know if he was super connected. Anyways, there's a story about him. He passed away about 3 weeks ago and was dropping one of our teams off at the airport, and they came up to him, and guards came up and said, your driver's asleep. And he had a heart attack. So a lot of people knew him. Always happy. There's the conference. So that's the 1,400 people. When we did the conference, it was so much fun. We had this big stage and lights and a TV backdrop, all of that kind of stuff. And so many kids came to Christ. This is our children's home. Some of the girls at the home, the girls' home. Fun place. So, anyways, well, I think I'm about done. I think I'm on time. So let me just close in prayer. Okay. Dear Lord, I just thank you for this time, for this church, for their commitment to the Philippines and to the ministry. Lord, I thank you for all that you have done at the ministry through them. Lord, I thank you for this team that's going to be going out soon. I pray that it would bless them and bless the people that come, that you would have the right people come. And Lord, I pray that you would change lives, both Filipino lives and the Americans who are coming. Change lives as they come. I thank you for this time in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys.